it is cool with you, James, I think we'll get started. We'll probably still have some additional stragglers come through here. So, did you want to just start us off with an intro of who you are and kind of why we're here today?
Sure. I been in e-commerce since 2010. Been in the Amazon space since 2017. Um, I started a 3PL in 2020, and then I co-founded AMZ United in 2023. So been around the block a little bit. Certainly not the oldest player in the game, but I've had my adventure of experience. Um, Plus, I'm 26, so like in comparison to my age, been doing this a while. Um, the e-com side is kind of my Amazon. I do a little bit. I've done Walmart, I've done eBay, etc. But Amazon's heavy focus. We primarily are doing brand management now. I've done everything from RA, OA, wholesale, etc. And then wholesale transitioned into brand management. I would do general wholesale, but I don't have any capital. Brand management's tying up a lot of our capital right now, which is not a bad thing. But I sell a lot of cookies and I sell a lot of electronics, and I'm about to sell other weird grocery items. So a little bit of everything. That business, that side of the business, is growing very, very well. Not only in terms of gross sales, but profit margins are increasing, which is very important given these times. Um, 3PL, we've been in the 3PL space for about 3-ish years, three and a half, somewhere along those lines. Last year we prepped over 600,000 units for many clients. We only do wholesale prep. We don't do arbitrage, RAOA, or whatever. Nothing against it. It's just we built a process that's really, really advantageous for wholesale. We specialize in prep versus most facilities like, hey, we do fulfillment and then we can also offer prep. Well, I decided to flip that and said, hey, I want to do prep first, get really, really good at that. We've built up relationships with Amazon directly. We have connections on the developer side. We have great software. And my goal is to bring the competitive advantage and economies of scale of prep to the prep side. So we did 264,000 glass, or no, uh, just under 300,000 glass items last year. So we can do complex prep, and um, we try to consolidate freight as much as we can. Obviously, with the split shipments, that's been a little bit of a curveball, but for the most part, I've been able to save clients tens of thousands of dollars on freight through various ways to optimize that. So and then lastly, AMZ United, anyone who's going to be in New Jersey in August, or if you can come to New Jersey in August, it's a pretty cool event. So yeah, I think that's it.
Beautiful. I know we had quite a few members in the community that did make it down to AMZ United last year, and they said it was a really good event. And you are the one that started that event, is that correct?
I started it with Diana, Scott Needham, and Michael. Um, we actually all met at Prosper. Well, Scott, me, and Diana met at Prosper. Like, this event is just, it's not for us. And then that led to, we brought on Michael because we just needed a little bit more support in different areas. And then we're like, well, let's do a wholesale event. Let's do an event that's dedicated to our niche. And we had 700 people our first year. We've already launched this year, and I don't know how many tickets we're at, but I'm hoping to hit as many as we did last year, hopefully more. This year we had to raise prices a little bit, partially because holy cow, food is expensive. But ultimately, we wanted to be able to do more with the event, provide more opportunity and resources and activities and speakers and stuff like that, and keep it the same quality. I don't want it to be this big, like, effectively sales pitch fest. Obviously, there's vendors and stuff like that, but I want it to be educational. I want you to be able to attend it and walk away saying, wow, I actually learned something. Not just learned it, but I know how to apply it in my business.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that, and like not to just like kind of blow smoke for yourself, but you are one of the few Amazon people. Like you're not specifically like a creator, but I found you just from finding random content on Instagram. You're one of the people that actually provides real in-depth analysis and value for things, whereas like a lot of people they just tell you just do this and like don't actually apply it, actually give any context as why you should do it. Whereas with a lot of stuff, the information that you provide, you actually give deep thought out analysis as to why you should do certain things a certain way or why you specifically do things a certain way, and I definitely appreciate that.
Well, Instagram stories, I know I should be posting it on my page or reels or something like that because they go away. But Instagram stories and LinkedIn is where I brain dump. So whatever comes out. Hopefully it's good. But my goal is just to like get my ideas out there, and occasionally I come out with an article every once in a while. Not very frequently, but usually they're quite in depth. And then whenever I feel like posting content, it's just like it is what it is. I am not an expert at everything, but I am certainly um, I have certainly experienced a lot, the good and the bad. I've lost tons of money. I've made a decent amount, and I have built really, really unique processes that allow us to do things. I always think about doing things at scale. So when we were sourcing for regular wholesale, we had catalogs of 30,000 SKUs. Um, we wanted to do that quickly. We wanted to be able to process that efficiently, but we still wanted to be thorough. So I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours, without exaggeration, on building sourcing processes, and I revolutionized the way we do sourcing, and for many others that I've whether consulted or talked with or worked with, because I try to think about things like how do we do this times 1,000 SKUs? Because what works for doing a few hundred SKUs or maybe 1,000 SKUs does not work for 30,000, 50,000, or 100,000 SKUs. And I'm not saying you're stocking that many, but you may be going through catalogs that big. So I think about everything, whether it's the prep side, whether it is the sourcing side, whether it is something else. Like, if this works at a small scale, how do I make it work at a larger scale?
Yep, definitely. And that's a good thing that many people like many people in our business, like a lot of them are relatively new. There's like a lot of people that do this as like a side hustle, so I don't think many people think about things that way. I do tend to think about things that way as well. I don't think I'm quite on the same level as you are, but yeah, I definitely appreciate when people take these things seriously and are able to do so.
Yeah, I still trying to figure everything out. I think that's a permanent state with Amazon, but at the same time, I definitely trying to basically, if I give away my content, that is just it's building my reputation in the community. I don't really have anything to sell. Yes, I have a 3PO. Yes, I have a conference, whatever. But I don't shove that down people's throats. I mean, they exist. If you need it, great. If not, I'm here.
Definitely, and that's greatly appreciated. Alrighty, so I think the main reason, because you mentioned that you can give information about the new low inventory fee, because you did a really in-depth article about that and did some good calculations for that. And then you also mentioned that you have done some pretty good analysis for the placement fees. For us in Canada, our community is primarily Canadians. The inbound placement fee doesn't apply in Canada yet, but I do know that a lot of sellers here do actively sell in the US. So we could, assuming that you have the time, I would definitely be open to touching on that if you have any information that you're willing to share. And then where I'd also like to go a little bit deeper is the low inventory fee, because that's something that's obviously going to impact us directly more. And from looking at your analysis, I do see that if you're not willing to manage your inventory properly, it can have some major impacts on yourself. And so that's why I think it's really important for everybody to understand this fee in depth. And you broke down things quite well. It took me a while to grasp everything properly. I read through your article many hours to ensure that I got everything proper, but I think I have a good understanding around it. But just to start off with, you mentioned that with the new placement fee in the U.S. with your 3PL, you were able to save quite a lot of money with those fees for your customers. Uh, are there any strategies that you're doing in order to do so that you're willing to share?
Yeah, so we have tested hundreds, if not over 1,000 different shipping plans, and we're continuously studying, analyzing to learn the Amazon algorithm. It is very, very time intensive and it takes a lot of just trial and error. But through that, we learn what things can be done in our favor, what things can be done against our best interest. And at the end of the day, our interest is saving the most amount of money, saving the most amount of time, and doing it within Amazon's limitations. So obviously, we don't want to do something that puts our account at risk of suspension. But at the same time, if there's a loophole, I'm gonna find it. So first thing would be if you're creating shipments, do not create shipments in Star Central. It is the least flexible and most annoying way to create shipments, in my opinion. Using a software, we use ScamPower. You don't have to use ScamPower, but there's lots of software out there. Will provide you a lot more flexibility in shipping stuff to Amazon, regardless of what you're shipping. Just because the process, the algorithm, the mechanics of how that works is totally different. So that would be my first recommendation. Like I said, we use ScamPower. It's like 100 or 80 bucks a month, and then the top tier is like 200 bucks. Not crazy expensive, um, but it's been very helpful for us. On top of that, there are many tools, including ScamPower, working on an optimizer function that allows you to potentially mitigate splits substantially. Does it eliminate them? No. There is still like there's always exceptions. It's Amazon, obviously, but the goal is for it to mitigate that. So that is currently in beta. I've been helping design some of that algorithm because I've been testing this a lot. Um, but the goal is hey, if we can ship it to as few destinations as possible and not pay placement fees, that is only a win in my book because I'm saving on shipping and I'm saving on placement fees. But at the end of the day, um, it comes down to still being prepared for the worst, um, and budgeting, whether it's for more shipping, whether it's replacement fees. On average, it's what we have seen is it's better to not pay placement fees. There may be a few exceptions, but in most of our studying, the placement fees greatly exceed the cost to ship them to multiple destinations. Obviously, if you have tools, you can potentially mitigate that. But if those loopholes get closed, they get closed, and we just adapt again.
Definitely. And so you were actually the one that put me onto Scam Power. I've been using it ever since you recommended it. Prior to that, I was using 2D Workflow. And so with these optimizations, like you mentioned, you're working on it. Are you working on the one that Scam Power mentioned that they're trying to introduce into their software?
Yes. So on March 1st, right when this opened, technically it opened on March 1st in the evening at about 6 p.m. my time. I had Paul, currently the owner of ScamPower, in my dining room testing it. Almost within 2 hours of its release, we started testing. We stayed up till who knows how late that night. We woke up, we started testing. We started testing. Went through all day Saturday. Had to watch a movie to get our mind off of FBA shipments because it was mind numbing. Went to sleep, woke up Sunday. We continued testing. He had to fly home or somewhere else, and then that week we resumed testing and testing and testing. So we were testing so many different shipments. What are things that hurt the splits? What are things that helped merge shipments? What are things that consistently split? What are things that don't consistently split? all the different variables, and we're still discovering more. We were factoring in, okay, how do we optimize this? How do we mitigate it? So we built up the first version of an optimizer. Then we built a second, like we kind of pushed that out, flushed that out to where it's at least usable. Um, and I believe that's currently in beta now. I was effectively an alpha tester in a way, but that's, I believe, in beta. And the second version of the optimizer is currently being developed. It's still on testing servers. It's not on any public server yet, but those testing servers are working better for other scenarios. It's actually a different algorithm. We've right now, I think, discovered completely different algorithms to optimize, and we still have other things that we need to add to those algorithms to help test more. However, it's only been 3 weeks, and we're working as fast as we can, type thing. I don't work for Scampower. I just genuinely like the software. It's been very helpful for us, helpful to adapt, and it's probably one of the most flexible on the market. And hopefully after version 2, because version 2 is a lot more powerful than version 1, if version 2 works as I anticipate, that will be pretty revolutionary for most shipments. There are a few weird exceptions, especially with oversize, that can be really funky sometimes. But so far, it has proven to be much more powerful and much more a lower what's the term? If version 1 is, let's say, 60% effective, version 2 might be 80% or 90%. I don't have exact numbers, but it's more effective than version 1.
Gotcha. So yeah, I was playing around and looking at, because obviously 2D workflow, like right when these new fees were introduced, they were advertising that they already have things in place that can help optimize your shipments, etc. It sounds like you guys have went quite a bit deeper than maybe they have, because from what I understand, and I obviously don't know their back end, I haven't talked to Larry about this, but from what I understand with the way that their process is working, is they're basically just their software is just adding units to shipments and then adjusting those units accordingly and like removing additional units, right? That's what I understand that their process is mainly doing. So like if Amazon, for example, is telling you that you need to send 100 units to this warehouse, 100 units to this warehouse, 100 to this warehouse, they're just increasing the amounts, trying to get more units to one warehouse, and then adjusting the figures and removing the additional shipments accordingly. That's everything that I understand from their process.
Correct. So they do that, and Scampower effectively does the same thing. But the problem is it's very, very hard to. It's not just, let's say it's a five-way split, 100 each. It's not something as simple as, oh, just multiply it by 5 and then you're good. The order of which products are processed, the types of products that are in it, and what I call FC sticky SKUs. There are SKUs that do not want to go to a certain destination, so those need to be processed differently. There's also different types, so oversized, hazmat, shoes, etc. Those are handled differently. So, like I said, the first version of the algorithm kind of got our basics covered, but the second version takes it to another level and says, "Hey, the first version got you 60% of the way there. Let's kick in version 2, and hopefully it is get you 99% there." And none of the softwares will be perfect, but the methods to get you to the final or end result, we've already found 3. That's not to say that there isn't even more, but there are multiple methods to determine what's the exact quantity, exact combination, because even changing one unit, not even one ASIN, just a single unit on a particular ASIN, a quantity by one more or one less, can have drastic impacts, not just for that product, but for the entire batch potentially.
Right. So there's a lot more thinking that goes into it than I originally thought.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things we have seen is if, let's say, you multiply it by 5 or whatever, and it completely changes the destinations. Well, that's a problem. Now you're not optimizing for the same destination anymore. So there's a lot of factors like that you have to take it very, very granular. You have to figure out. Well, we learned that if you turn on this thing in the back end of the API, it's not even something that you have to worry about as a user. But if this thing is turned on or off, it changes how destinations are selected. So all these different variables combined, 2D Workflow uses the same methodology as 9yard, which uses the same methodology as ScanPower, but all have different methods to get there. And effectively, the one with the best method will be the most optimized. I'm not saying ScanPower is the best. I'm not saying 2D Workflow is the best. But at the end of the day, the one with the best algorithm will produce the best results.
For sure. And for everybody that's here and everybody that's going to be listening on the video afterwards, so you may think that this doesn't apply to your business because you only sell in Canada. So yeah, like right now, this only applies to the U.S. If you ever expand to the U.S., of course, this is going to impact you. And I know we have a lot of sellers that do sell in the U.S., but historically speaking, changes that happen with Amazon, especially changes like this, they tend to happen in the US market first, and then a short period of time later, they tend to creep up to Canada, especially when it's like additional fees and things of this nature. So we can never say for sure that these fees are going to come to Canada, but I would expect probably in the next year or two, it will probably come here. We may not be as greatly impacted here because we have a lot fewer warehouses in here compared to the US, but it wouldn't surprise me if we get these fees sometime down the road.
Yep. In fact, I think the only time I've ever seen something happen to Canada before the US was back in COVID with restock limits.
Yep, I did not enjoy that time at all.
So I intimately remember that time because I also released a fairly intensive research article from that. And Canada was hit first, and I said, guys, this is going to happen to the U.S. This is going to happen to the U.S. No one believed me, and then everyone panicked when it hit the U.S. And I said, "What have I been telling you?"
Yep. No, and I look at things the exact same way, but just with the opposite end, because typically most things happen in the U.S. first. Like anything from, like if we look way back from long-term storage fees,
The IPI,
IPI,
the other fees that we've been, gosh, there's a fee for breathing practically.
the new what is it? The new return processing fee. Those are hitting both
Oh
markets
my
at the
goodness.
same time, but okay, cool. So yeah, so that's all really good information to have, and I definitely appreciate that Paul is working. You and Paul are working on that. I think it was last year we actually had Paul in here do a live session with everybody for Scam Power 2, and since switching over to Scam Power, originally 2D Workflow and then Scam Power, it's helped our personal process a ton because we use it as our entire prep and pack software as well, and utilizing that
Mhm.
has increased our production quite a lot, like over probably like 15%.
Well, and the big thing about Scam Power is it's fully integrated. It's not just relying on 2D barcodes. It's you're sending your feeds, which are the best form of contents for Amazon. Um, and 2D Workflow doesn't have that option. They only do 2D barcodes, which do they work? Sure. Is it the best option? Not necessarily. Um, the Scam Power side of things, we've been working with them for quite a long time. There's a lot of features on that tool that were things that I was like really pushing for, and especially this optimizer, I bugged Paul so much, and I feel bad because it was pretty brutal. But I pushed him. I was like, the market needs this. The market needs this, and um, I know it's not in production yet, but we wanted to be very, very careful because one, we didn't know what March 1st was going to look like. No one knew, not even Larry. No one truly knew what March 1st was going to yield. When March 1st hit, we immediately started testing, but we wanted to build out something and test it on the new algorithm um, bef- before kind of marketing it in the sense that like we want to know how it works, not hope we know how it works, and that's why it's taking a little bit longer. But the discoveries that we're making in the process allows us to see, wow, oh, if we do this, like this actually helps, this hurts. Let's optimize against this or for that, etc.
For sure. And so, like, we also don't know if and when Amazon is ever going to close this loophole, right? Because if we look at things like when we had the restock limits issue, there was things again like 2D workflow where they were essentially advertising that they can help. um, optimize your shipments where, or sorry, it wasn't for the restock limits. It was for in the event you needed to change your shipment for more than 5% or 6 units. And so
Mm.
their whole process of when that happened. The reason why I correlate this with restock limits is because it kind of messed with us a bit, because what they were doing is their software is essentially making just a new shipment for you and then adjusting those units accordingly, so you didn't have to do it by yourself. And the first time I tried utilizing 2D workflow to do that is when we had restock limits and we were getting close to our cap. And so they just rolled out this feature, and that obviously wasn't tested or factored in. So I went to go adjust the amount of units that we had, because we received, I think it was like 20 damaged units, and they were already in the shipment. And we weren't able to do it. We were getting issues with Amazon's backend saying that we can't send in the shipment because it was trying to make a new shipment while our existing shipment was already open, and we were hitting our cap for units, right? So that completely just screwed up our workflow for that day.
Yep, and when we found out how the MWS was going to get deprecated, which I believe was not this year but last year in early January, um, I had Paul and about five other sellers fly down all across the U.S., New Jersey, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, everywhere, and we all flew down in September to analyze, plan, build a process for how it's going to work in January. So in January, when everyone was panicking, like, "Oh, I can no longer add to existing shipments," blah blah blah, I don't know what to do. We had already had a process that was we were 4 months ahead of the game, and we literally flipped a switch, and it took us about a week of operational adjustment because it is still an adjustment, but we were able to continue working kind of as normal. Versus other people were dropped like the hammer. It's like, oh, surprise, adapt, and you had to figure out a process overnight. Well, we already had 4 months of planning ahead of that.
Yeah. I just wanted to address this quickly just because somebody just popped a question into the chat here. Anthony just asked, is there a legit way to push shipments to certain warehouses, as in Ontario? Does 2D Workflow help with that, or is it only in the US? So I'm not sure if James knows anything that I don't know, but as far as I'm aware, in Canada, we don't have like any option for any type of inventory placement here whatsoever. So as far as I know, no software would be able to help you to do that either.
The optimizer may apply to certain components of Canada depending on how the shipment is created. However, um, you may not have the same results. That's the only problem because the algorithm in Canada right now is the algorithm that we're building out for the optimizer in the US is built around the US split.
Of course.
How it is working in Canada, Canada may split shipments through different means, different mechanics, different numbers, I don't know, different logarithmic scales, all these things. So we don't know what Canada looks like right now. It's worth a try when it comes out, but I, I don't know, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Thankfully, right now, like I believe Anthony was just asking kind of in general because we don't have the placement fees yet, just to see if he can push all his units to one warehouse. Generally speaking, in Canada, we tend to have less split shipments overall. Most of the time, most of our splits only happen with like oversized units and standard size and hazmat, etc.
Yeah,
No,
and most of those splits you're never going to get away from because the warehouses that can handle hazmat, their specialty, their unique warehouses, the warehouses that handle oversized, once again, specialty equipment, specialty warehousing, to go to different types of warehouses.
definitely. And yeah, like Chris made a comment that if we were able to choose like West or East Coast for warehouses, that would be huge. And 100%, like if you're in Ontario, obviously ideally you'd like an Ontario FC. It just generally speaking, it'll probably get there and get received quicker. But yeah, as far as I personally know, we don't have any type of options like that in Canada right now. I know in the US they have the option, or they had the option to do like inventory placement for an additional fee. We don't have that here in Canada.
Yep, Canada, you basically have your west and your east coast. It's you'll have had funny, hilarious challenges in COVID where it was all messed up, but the distribution of warehouses in Canada is a lot different.
Yeah.
You're not going to have 20 big warehouses in I don't know Alberta because There's just not that many people there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're definitely more so condensed too. Like we definitely have a couple in Alberta, but most of our warehouses are condensed in basically Ontario, and then we have a couple in like BC and some of the other provinces, but
Yeah.
mostly Ontario.
Your biggest thing is you have your west side, which is like your Vancouver, a little bit over there, but then you have your east side, which is like all Ontario, your Toronto, all that stuff, and then everything in the middle is just like it's there,
Yeah,
but doesn't have a lot of people.
yeah. I've been waiting for years for a FC to come to Saskatchewan, which is dead center of Canada. That's where I am, but I don't imagine it'll ever happen because we have
It
a
may be dead center, but it doesn't have any people.
yeah. I mean, we have like a million people in the entire province, so.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So then, if we can, I would also like to transition into talking about the new low inventory fee. And so, again, for everybody that that has just recently joined, this is a fee that's getting applied April 1st, and this is a fee that is impacting both Canada and the US. As far as I know, it's probably impacting all markets across the world, but for sure it's impacting Canada and the US. So did you want to walk us through kind of what that is, James, and what you've kind of figured out of how to optimize that as well?
Yeah, so obviously, I'm sure you'll put in your chats and stuff like that the article links. So I encourage people to read that. I'm not going to go through it on this call just because I don't know if I have enough brain power right now to do that. But I will hit on some very key points. Couple things. One, dispel a few quick myths that are the most commonly confused part. If you run out of stock, you're not going to be charged the fee. The fee is only incurred on outbound orders. So now, when is that incurred? We'll get into that. But um, the a lot of people are like, well, if I don't have any stock, I don't want to be paying fees. Well, that's not how this works. Um, the next piece is once again super confusing. It's at the parent ASIN level. So if you have products that are in a lot of variations, especially clothing, grocery, anything with like lots of flavors, colors, styles, it's not that it's a bad or a good thing. It's just more complicated. Wonderful Amazon. So instead of saying, hey, you've got one ASIN with no variations, that's very easy to track because there's only one set of data. Well, if you have 5 variations now you need to add up all the data for that, for each child and combine it into one. So that's why those two things are very, very important to understand. To see where this data is going to be manage FBA inventory, not manage inventory. You have to go to manage FBA inventory. There's a column. Make sure your preferences show it. Historical days of supply or stock or something like that. I keep getting those a bit confused, but same idea. Historical days of something. And if any of those numbers are under 28 or 28 or less, you're below the threshold. So how that basically works is Amazon wants to see a strong ratio between how many units you sold and how many units you stocked. And they want that threshold to be above 28. Now it's an average over the past 30 days, over the past 90 days. So you can dip below for a day and it'll be fine. Problem is if your average is below 28 days of supply, and what that means is, let's say you sell one a day. If you stock 50, that's 50 days of supply. If you stock 40, you have 40 days of supply. If you sell 2 a day and you stock 100 units, you have 50 days of supply. So that's how that math works. Um, Amazon wants you to stay above 28 days of supply per parent ASIN. Now, a couple challenges. What if I'm I'm testing a new product? I am trying out some new SKUs. Well, you have basically 3 options. You send in a small quantity and just have to pay the fee. 2, you send in like 60 days worth of inventory. Well, if it's testing this product, I don't know how many days. That's the problem. Or three, you can try to manage your inventory so you stay above that threshold and restock really quickly, but that can be very, very hard to do. At the end of the day, you want your average historical days of supply to be above 28. If you dip below it, then you will be incurring a low inventory fee. And that's kind of where the article dives into. My question wasn't, oh, I just need to stock 28 days. Easy. Well, one, when is anything on Amazon easy? No, never. And two, any slight hiccup in a supply chain with Amazon checking in, etc., that's a hurdle that you have to overcome. Amazon does not count stuff that is inbound as part of this calculation. So if your stuff is shipped, but it hasn't been checked in and receiving in time, you could fall below that threshold potentially. They are not counting inbound inventory for it. The next thing is, I was like, well, if I know I need to be above 28, but how much more above? I don't want to stock 300 days of inventory. I'm going to get nailed with long-term storage fees. But I also don't want to stock 30 days of inventory because then I got to send in inventory every 2 days. And that's where I spent the 36 hours building a calculator and doing all the calculus, particularly some multivariable wave function calculus. Not fun, but I built a calculator. It ain't perfect. There is some flaws, but for the most part, it's close enough for most of y'all. I would look into using that to learn kind of a gauge what's your average product size. So for me, my average product size of standard products is 0.2 cubic feet. The average product size across some of our clients is about 0.8 cubic feet, or no, 0.08, sorry, 0.08 cubic feet. So the fee is highly dependent on your product size, and you want to gauge, hey, how much inventory should I be stocking? For your inventory, it may be, on average, 60 days. So it's going to say your range should be 28 to 60. Maybe for other products, it'll be 28 to 120 days. I don't know. And then there's old Q4, because Amazon loves to charge an arm and a leg, and possibly a kidney too, for Q4 storage fees. So what was something that was 28 to 120 might be 28 to 75 in Q4. So that's your optimal range. Otherwise, you're paying more in low inventory fees, or if you stock too much, you're paying more in storage fees. At the end of the day, you want to be as lean as possible, but not so lean that you're incurring low inventory fees. But I hope that's a good summary. Happy to go into questions.
Definitely. And so yeah, like with that, everybody, obviously the size thresholds do differ a little bit from Canada and the U.S. So like you can review each article, you just have to switch to the corresponding marketplace in Seller Central in order to view the corresponding fees. But everything else James is discussing applies exactly the same way. The only thing that's slightly different is our sizes and the amount of the fee that we are charged. So I might have to either harass James in the future or get access to some of his calculations to make a adjustment for a Canadian calculator, but we'll see if that can happen.
Well, the calculator is not perfect. The hard part with it is the figuring out how what size tier your product is and what fee it goes into is not a big deal. The hardest part is like, what's that maximum threshold? I had to figure out the trend line for that. Well, it's not a straight line, because why would Amazon make it that easy? And two, it's not an exponential or logarithmic line because of all the curveballs Amazon adds in. So it's this like stepped line that takes an absurd math formula that I didn't even figure out the final one because I was like, I'm not spending any more time on this. You don't need that calculator to still make wise business decisions. What you really want to do is say, hey, this product I should not dip below 28 days. How much inventory do I need to buy and how frequently am I going to buy it, or can you buy it, or I don't know. Every vendor's a little bit different, and what's your lead times to make sure I don't run out of stock. So if you sell one a day, personally, as a general rule of thumb, I want to be staying in like the 50 to 60 days of inventory range. Because if I dip below that, whew, I'm running risk of dipping below that 28. If I go above that, maybe I'm just like, I can buy more frequently. I can buy it twice a month instead of once a month, or I can buy it, I don't know, every 3 weeks or whatever it is. That's kind of my target on average. There are exceptions, smaller products, pens, pencils, Sharpies, whatever. Those, you're better off stocking 100 days worth of inventory than you are running below 28 days. But your medium size, especially bulkier products, not oversized, but bulkier, I'm going to target, say, 60 to 90 days worth of inventory. In general, it'll also help your sales. But the hardest part of this largest adjustment for most sellers is not the complexity of the fee. It's the fact that you're going to have to stock more inventory to produce the same amount of sales before. So if you had $100,000 in inventory, and let's say that was 30 days of inventory, and you were keeping it very lean and you're doing very well, now you realistically need $200,000 worth of inventory to generate the same amount of sales just to not pay the fee. So that is a huge capital adjustment. We're talking about potentially doubling your inventory. Now, if you were hovering around the 45 days, maybe you don't need quite as much as double. That'd be 90. But you're still going to need a lot of capital to boost up your inventory levels, because most of us think, oh, I'm going to buy more inventory, therefore I'm going to sell more. Well, no, you're going to buy more inventory and you're going to sell the same amount. You need to be able to prepare your finances for that. And that's what I've been doing for the past 3-4 months. Is my sales have been growing a little bit, which is nice, but not into any new SKUs. We had a couple one-off new SKUs here and there, but I'm not expanding into new SKUs. I'm actually just going deeper. So a SKU I would normally stock 1,200 of, I have 4,500 units of at Amazon right now, because 1,200 was very, very lean, and I was keeping it, sending it in frequently, etc. Now I have 96 days of inventory of that item because I don't want to run too low. It sells very well. Now, in turn, has that gotten me more buy box share or more less out of stock periods? Sure, that's helped in that area. Still took a ton of money to build up not just one SKU, but hundreds of SKUs to that level. And my account's not perfect. It still has plenty of SKUs that are below that threshold. But compared to 2 months ago, a whole lot better.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to address some things because we obviously see some like profit calculators like RevSeller, SellerAmp, etc. starting to factor in just like some additional fees into their back end based on the potential inventory placements that you're going to have. So like
Yep.
if you if you're like relatively low scale or you just want to try take the guesswork out of it, I suppose you could use those as a brief guesstimation to add on those additional fees into your profit calculations. However, I believe it's still very important to understand these fees that are happening so you can actually understand if and when you want to optimize your inventory and to ensure that you are actually profitable, you're able to do so, right? Because if you have inventory that isn't very profitable, but say moves a ton of units, like say sub $2, if you're not actually paying attention to what kind of impacts these fees can have, you could quite easily get into a situation where you're unprofitable and you're actually paying Amazon to fulfill that inventory for you. And obviously that's a place that you don't want to be. So that's why it's very important to understand these numbers, right? And then you can also adjust it on the fly for your inventory, because it's not going to be a one size fits all, a one fee fits all for everything, right? Whereas a lot of these profit calculators are kind of factoring that in general. Like they're not super perfect and it's going to be dependent on your stock. So that's why it's very
What
important.
I
Sorry, go ahead.
what I told a call yesterday was you can factor in the worst case scenario for your product, but it's going to reduce the amount of stuff you can source. So what I suggest is adjust the low inventory fee amount, whether it's the 1 to 14 day, 14 to 21, 21 to 28, or zero fee for over 28. not based on a particular product, but based on how much you can and are comfortable with sourcing. So if you're buying from a vendor, let's say it's arbitrage, they have a limit of 6, and that item sells 60 units a month, you're probably going to want to factor in the lowest or the most expensive fee in the lowest time frame, the 1 to 14, because you almost are guaranteed to get hit with that. Now, if it's a wholesale product, hey, I can buy 200 of these and they sell 60 units a month. Cool. Maybe you'll want to plan for that fee not to be there. At the end of the day, you have to be aware that you're going to watch your inventory a lot more. In COVID, we were watching restock limits, we were watching IPI. We don't need to watch those as much anymore. They're there, but they're not really an impact to most people. Now Amazon's saying, hey, you guys need to focus on your inventory again. Maybe not in the same way COVID had it, but you need to focus on how you're managing your inventory. Amazon is no longer a dumping ground for operations. Kind of used to be. It used to be like, oh, we'll do your fulfillment, do all this stuff. You don't have to worry about that. You just focus on selling it, maybe run some ads, whatever. Now it's no, you need to manage your operations too, because we're tired of doing it. That's Amazon.
Yeah, and like it does make sense to an extent. Obviously, these fees are not nice, but it makes sense what they're doing from their perspective. And I've seen this happen over the course of a long time, is where Amazon slowly implements different processes to ensure that they are more so having sellers on their platform that are taking things more seriously, and they push certain things like before they used to have no storage fees whatsoever. Then they introduced storage fees because they had massive amounts of books from booksellers supplied in their warehouses. Then they started introducing long-term storage fees, and they just slowly introduce these things over time to ensure that they are getting more serious people on their platform and people that are managing their inventory and making it like a real business overall.
Yep.
A few other things I want to address is I've seen that Anthony made a comment here. He said, I wonder if sellers will create duplicate ASINs just to get the 6 month grace period. That's not the case, so that's only for brand new ASINs in the Amazon catalog. It doesn't apply just because you make a new ASIN, it's new ASINs in the Amazon catalog.
So I think what a better way to put that is if you create a new SKU for your Seller Central account, that will not apply. If you
Right.
create a new ASIN from scratch, which by the way is getting very hard to create a duplicate for, yes, you will get that period. But one, you're doing something that's not TOS compliant. You're not supposed to create duplicate ASINs. Now SKUs, you can create duplicate SKUs. They don't like it, but they rarely enforce it. However, that ain't going to get you out of the fee.
Yep.
And plus, launching a new ASIN is a process. That's quite intensive. I've done it quite successfully, but that's not something that you just nonchalantly like, oh, I'm just going to go create another ASIN. Like, no, you got to launch, you got to get reviews, you got to promote, you got to do ads, all this other stuff. I would not do that just to save a little bit on fees.
Yeah, and like James says, it's not TOS compliant, and it can be a huge pain in the ass because like Amazon does a pretty good job with matching UPCs. So you either have to try to use a UPC that doesn't exist already in Amazon's catalog, or try to get like G10 exemptions, and that can be a pain in the ass.
And if you're doing it to a product that has a UPC and you're trying to get it without, like, it's just a recipe for a lot of mess. Like I said, if you're going to launch a brand new product or create a new brand new product, different story. That's good for that. But in terms of getting avoiding the fee, uh, good luck. Uh, you do you, but it's not going to be sustainable, and it's going to be very very hard to do it that way.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to address a few more things, some key points I pulled out of James's article as well. Is that of course this fee right now it's only applying to standard size products. So in Canada it'll apply to envelope and standard size products for us. It doesn't apply to new sellers. So if you're brand new on the FBA platform, you have a 365-day grace period where this does not apply to you. That doesn't mean that you should completely ignore this, but this gives you time to get a feel for their processes, your inventory workflow, um, how you're able to effectively manage inventory. So if you are brand new, like you may not want to focus on this in the first couple months, but this is something that you should definitely start considering and trying to work into your workflow, at least by the time you're like 6 months in, just to ensure you have an understanding of how this works and how you're going to adjust your shipping process accordingly, your shipping and ordering process. As Anthony mentioned, as we just mentioned here, it doesn't apply to new ASINs for 180 days or brand new SKUs in Amazon's catalog. And like James mentioned, it only applies to future orders. So that's, I think, one thing that I believe some people may have questions about is, like, say, especially if I'm an arbitrage seller and I'm purchasing things on, like, doing like opportunity buys, like say I'm buying things that are on sale or on clearance, will this impact me? And so this only applies to future orders. So as long as you stock enough inventory where you do not get assessed the low inventory fee, which I believe James can probably uh, clear out a little bit
Mm-hmm.
further. Assuming that you just stock the inventory once and sell out and don't go below that threshold and never restock that inventory, then you shouldn't get assessed that fee. Is that correct, James?
Correct. The problem is calculating how much you need to stock, and sometimes you're not able to get that stock. So,
Right.
a couple things with that is the fee is. This is such a mess on Amazon's part. The fee is calculated once a week at the parent ASIN level on Sunday night / Monday morning at midnight or 1 a.m. Pacific, whatever. Then, because Amazon's and always wonderfully broken, um, they don't display that update for another 4 days right now. I think that's a broken piece of functionality, but wonderful Amazon delays that data from us even further. So not only do we have it only updates once a week, effectively a 7-day lag potentially. We also did 4 more days. So now we're like running over a week where we are kind of unknown. The second part is if during that recalculation period, that night, you're above the threshold, you're good for a week. Great. But if you're below it, you're going to be paying that fee for every outbound order for that entire week. So it's good in some cases because it can protect you, but it's bad in other cases because you could be stuck with that fee even if you were 27.9 days. You could now be paying that fee for every child ASIN unit you sell in the next 7 days.
Right. And so, from the article that you had, it seemed like your general consensus of your standard recommendation, without going that deep into it, is basically to never dip below 35 days worth of stock. Is that correct?
Well, I say 35, but because Amazon cannot seem to get their act together on releasing the data on time, you probably got to add another 4 or 5 days to that. So realistically, 40. And that's why I said, hey, right now, if I target 60 to 90, I don't want to dip below 50.
Right. And then, so yeah, for anybody that's in here that say they're a new seller or they're not actively managing their inventory, this is where you need to start utilizing like Amazon's inventory calculations or third-party tools to start managing your inventory, figuring out how much days worth of stock you have left, figuring out what your supplier lead times are, whether that's an OA supplier, your wholesaler, private label, etc. So you're figure out what your lead time is. So for that unit to get to you and for you to prep it, get it to Amazon, and actually physically get received, and then you factor that in on when you should be purchasing inventory to send off to Amazon.
Another problem
Yep.
is if you are on the Manage FBA inventory page, there is a field called minimum inventory level. Now, in a logical world, that would be approximately 28 days of supply. The problem we have is that we are playing in Amazon's world. Amazon's world defies all logic. That minimum inventory metric usually has a number against it. For now, unless they fix it, is the most worthless metric on Amazon. It is so awfully terrible. I had a product that was selling a little over 1 unit a day. So you'd say, oh, we should probably stock like 40 units, right? No, it said to stock 180 units. So you may think, oh, they're overestimating. Okay, maybe we just adjust it down. But wait, there's more. I had a unit that sells 9.9 units a day. How many units should I stock to maintain the minimum? Okay, 28. 9.9 is about 10. So let's just say 28 times 10. I need 280. Guess what number Amazon suggested to be my minimum stock level for an item that sells about 10 a day?
Like what?
34 units.
Yeah.
Because we only need 4 days of inventory for this for some mind boggling reason. So, for those that think that Amazon's being nice and helping us calculate this, I feel bad for you, but they're absolutely not.
Yeah, and it's kind of always been like that with like Amazon's suggested inventory that they suggest that you send off to Amazon. I've never like they've had that feature in their inventory system for a long time. I've always never paid attention to that because they never seem to make sense. So it seems like with this as well, it's something that we should probably just ignore.
So, once again, you have more work to do to manage your own inventory.
Of
What a
course,
joy.
of course. Flipper just asked. He just asked if you think listing prices will naturally go up to compensate for these additional fees.
Okay, let's go back to Logic World. Logic World says, yes, listing prices would rise when fees rise, right? The problem is have you ever spoken to another Amazon seller? Like, the average Amazon seller ain't making much money anyways. So what makes you think that they're going to be adjusting to this very quickly? The second piece is I've had probably about a dozen of these calls. And I'm not saying y'all aren't smart for having a call. That's totally fine. But if I have to educate hundreds of people via calls about a fee, that means that the average seller has some confusion around the fee. And I'm not speaking to every seller. I've probably spoken to a few hundred, maybe close to 1,000. I don't know. Regardless, a really, really tiny, 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 tiny sliver of a fraction of the total number of Amazon sellers I have spoken to. So while may have helped many, many people, we're talking about averages here. And there are going to be plenty that do understand the fee. But let's be honest, it is not going to be the majority. And if you don't understand something, you kind of tend to ignore it. Therefore, you don't react to it until you ask your accountant and you say, I sold $1 million on Amazon last year and I made $5,000. What am I doing? So that's what I wish would happen, is prices would rise. What do I think will happen? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and like for most standard fees that Amazon has, like when they have their fee increases every single year, typically speaking, over the course of a couple months, like depending on the ASIN, usually about 3 to 6 plus months, we do typically tend to see the price increase. But those are more obvious fee increases that people see immediately. It's reflected on Amazon's revenue calculator, it's reflected on all the profit calculators that are out there. This is not as clear, and it's more hidden. So I could definitely see James's point.
Yep. And it's not something that's on the front end, it's on the back end.
Right.
So you're not paying this fee on like every order right away, or you're not paying this fee when you send it in or when you're sourcing. This is like you might pay this fee after you've sold it.
Right.
Well, you're not going to see that until you look at your P&L. And let's be honest, how many sellers actually have accurate profit and loss statement? Most sellers don't even know what a balance sheet is.
Yeah, it's something I push all the time. When people always say I just use Sellerboard for my accounting, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Seller board is like a good like overview, but like if you don't have a balance sheet, you don't have accounting.
Yeah.
Not a profit and loss, like that's needed too, but like if you don't even know what a balance sheet is, then you definitely don't have accounting figured out.
Yeah, and like that's just the thing that comes like with the nature of this beast is because generally speaking the barrier of entry is so low. So we do have a lot of people that are just generally new to business. So a lot of people don't have that experience, and that's something that they have to learn over time, or they're not going to be in business for very long.
Yep.
So Flipper also asked, with people sending in more inventory, wouldn't you feel that the warehouses may get overwhelmed?
Everyone's in a deep state of panic right now. I spoke to a $80 million a year brand. As of last week, they had not sent a single shipment in March out of sheer what the heck are we doing? Because of all the fee changes and the split shipments and all this other stuff. On the second hand, I think it's actually the opposite. If you actually optimize to stay in stock, then you have less urgent need for freight to check in as quickly, hopefully, because you have some cover stock, you have larger safety stock. But I don't think the warehouses are going to get any better. I mean, they are where they are. They'll be okay for like a month or two, but people are going to need to send in stock. So at the end of the day, nope, Amazon's not going to get much more efficient.
I would assume, but again, we're talking Amazon, that they are trying to prepare for this. But I mean, who really knows?
Um, no, actually not. This hit Amazon and caused a wave internally. I've been privileged with some interesting communication within Amazon. Um, I think the team that built the placement algorithm might be the most hated team at Amazon right now. That's my own personal opinion because the amount of departments that it affected very negatively was not just like one or two. It was like huge collateral damage within Amazon. So we knew the sellers don't like it. Well, that's obvious. But when Amazon does something bad and it affects Amazon themselves negatively, it's like we shot ourselves in the foot.
Right. But of course, they introduced it, so they're not going to backpedal anytime soon.
There is discussions that they're okay. I'm 99% sure something is going to be changing. I just don't know what that something is yet because they realize they messed up. I have been indirectly confirmed of that. That they're like, this ain't working how we originally planned, and something's got to change. Now, will it change back to what it was? I highly doubt it, but something will change. I just don't know what that is, how it's going to change, etc.
Yeah, I mean, like even if they made it more easier to figure out and just more clear and not so convoluted,
Oh
right?
no, they're definitely not going to make it more clear. Why would they do that?
I would hope that's the minimum that they would do, but yeah, it's Amazon.
Yeah, they're not in the business of making it easier. They cause too much damage too quick.
Yeah. So Chris just mentioned, so I just wanted to read this out here just to see. A little tip I just thought of, if you are going to go under the threshold, just raise your price to account for that fee until you restock. If you end up selling in that time, then you will still break even as if you were not getting charged the fee. Then when you restock, lower the price again.
So I've been asked this question on a few different calls, and I say that is the absolute most perfect way to do it. Now do it times 1,000 SKUs every week. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm serious. Like, it's a great way to handle it. But how do you do it at scale? You can do that for 5, 10, 20, maybe even 100 SKUs. But how are you going to do it for 1,000?
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
So if you can manage to figure that out, props to you. And your margins will reward you for it. But I'm not figure that out at scale. without developing my own custom software to, well, yeah, that's crazy.
Like in theory, if you increase your price, where you never go under that threshold, so you're about to go under, your price increases, so you just blatantly stop selling units until more inventory hits the warehouse, then that would cause you to completely avoid that fee, correct?
Sure,
Yeah.
that's a method. I just don't know how you're going to do it.
Right.
If you can manage it, props to you. You will be rewarded with your margin. I just don't know how to do that at scale and manage it without spending a ton of money either on software or on staff to do that.
Yeah. 100%. I could, yeah, like you mentioned, at a very small scale, it could definitely probably be a lot easier to manage, but at any decent size scale, it would become very difficult for sure, or very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, great idea. Just figure out how to do it.
So yeah, it would obviously be nice if a repricing software could figure that out, but I doubt that's going to happen in the near future. Um,
Well, the problem is the repricing software is like I've spoken to a lot of them, and they are so rigid. They're there to serve the masses, not the best, not the most optimized sellers. I've spoken to SellerSnap, I've spoken to Aura, I've spoken to BQ, I've spoken to so many of them, and they're not in the business of building the best repricer. They're in the business of building the most marketable repricer.
for sure. Just to go on kind of a bit of a tangent because we're talking about it. I seen you previously make some comments about repricing AI kind of being limited, and I believe I don't know if you said as much, but kind of a gimmick. Was that correct? Did I get that correct?
Most AI conversations around repricing, most people don't even want AI repricing. What they want is machine learning.
Right.
They're two totally different things. And personally, I don't even want either. I want repricing that's based on logic. AI is actually the opposite of logic. There isn't logic behind it. That's why it's AI, it's artificial intelligence. So I would much rather know exactly why my repricer works the way it works. I want it to be based on math, on what's the most profitable method. I don't want it to be based off of some arbitrary intelligence that very well is hard to regulate because you don't know how it's optimizing it. They can't tell you how it's going to work if it's using AI. If they can tell you how it's going to work exactly, that's either machine learning or none of that at all. Like it's logic. I want logic.
Yeah. And that makes a whole lot of sense. And
And
yeah,
machine learning isn't so bad, but people use AI because it's cool marketing lingo.
yeah, I've done some comparisons with regular repricers, like going really in depth rule based versus their AIs that they offer. And honestly, because my rule based is fairly specific and we go fairly in depth for different scenarios, I never found their quote unquote AI to make that much of a difference for myself.
Exactly. I would rather have 100 layer conditional rules than any sort of AI.
Right. I 100% agree. But everybody is all about like the new AI with Be Cool or the AI with Seller Snap, whatever.
Ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Like, because you like marketing lingo? Cool. Well, let me sell you a bridge I designed in AI.
Very true. Okay,
That needs
cool.
to be a t-shirt.
You should start making merch and putting that on there.
Well, let me, like the whole, it takes the whole, like, I have a bridge to sell you, but like, I now have an AI bridge to sell you.
Yeah, so the first T-shirt is the standard one. That one costs you $10. The AI one costs you 50.
Yeah. This is a t-shirt. This is a t-shirt designed by AI.
100%.
Oh, I want AI now. Oh, I spent $40 more.
Cool. So I think we covered most of what was happening with these new fees that are coming out. Um, does anybody else have any other questions at all? None of you are able to hop on the mic unless you request to speak. But if you want to hop on the mic, certainly request it and we can get you on here. Or you can ask any questions in the chat. We'll probably be wrapping up here shortly. James, was there anything else you wanted to add at all for the low inventory fee?
Uh, just watch your inventory. I mean, you have to manage it that much more. Amazon is no longer set it and forget it. But other than that, uh, just be prepared for more fees as usual. The one good thing is, and it's not much. Amazon thinks it's a big deal, but it's not much. Pick and pack fees and storage fees also go down on April 1st as well.
Yep. Definitely going to compensate for all these other fees.
It's still a net increase in fees, but if you optimize everything and are really, really, really good, there are certain limited scenarios where you can actually come out with lower fees.
Yeah.
The average person will not come out with lower fees, but it is mathematically possible, and I know a seller that's probably going to be able to do it at scale because he's more obsessive about inventory management than I am, which is pretty darn hard to do. I think he will come out being able to pay less in fees after April 1st, but it'll just require an absurd amount of management.
Right. For yourself, if you don't mind me asking, James, are you using custom software to help manage your inventory? Are you using like any of the out-of-box available softwares that are out there?
I use this really, really advanced stuff called Google Sheets in my brain.
Fair enough.
The Google Sheets is the advanced part. Um, Obviously, I have I have all the tools and stuff like that. But I don't use any software on it right now because the amount of variables I factor in. So, like with one vendor, I have I need to order it by the case level, but I also need to order it by like a pallet level, and I also need to order variety packs, and they have to. My minimum order quantity is a pallet, but my maximum order quantity is a truck. If I do a second truck, it has to go on another PO. It's like there's so many different variables with it.
Right.
We do it manually. It's not, I can build a really, really fast restock process. So when I was doing regular wholesale, we could restock against 30,000 SKUs in less than 3 hours from setup to PO being placed. So I'm really good at like building a bulk process, but as I've moved into more brand management and working with brands, it becomes a lot more nuanced and a lot more variables. But it's working. Is it ideal? Is it something that has lots of room for improvement? It is what it is for now. I will probably improve it later on, but for now, it's quite manual.
That's good to know. So like I have utilized quite a few different softwares, but it's just good to know that, especially at certain scales, you're able to do this as manual because a lot of people always have concerns about learning all these different softwares, all the additional costs incurred, etc. So it's always just nice to see that somebody's able to do it successfully in more of a manual way.
The number one lesson I got from working with my prep clients was one particular client. He is one of our largest clients, um, 8-figure seller, does very well. He has one assistant that works part time. He doesn't have any VAs. He doesn't have any like major employees. He outsources all of his prep, mostly to me, and he's very lean. And he has thousands of SKUs, dozens of suppliers, sells millions and millions of dollars a year, and it's basically just him and an assistant. If that doesn't tell you what you should like really focus on in your business, yes, it is great to outsource. It is great to have VAs. It is great to have helpers. but you have to grow lean.
Yep.
If you hire people just to hire people, you're going to spend a whole lot of money that you don't need to spend. My business is the same way. I have a part-time VA. Probably works about 20 hours a week for me. I outsource some of my ads to an ads guy. Um, and there's a couple other miscellaneous things that I've outsourced in the past, but the majority of my Amazon account is managed by myself. The VA does a little bit of administrative work, handles some repetitive things, but at the end of the day, my company runs very, very lean. And that's not just an inventory, that's people. So to think, oh, I need 5 people, I need 2 buyers, I need 20 VAs, you don't. We ran an 8-person VA team earlier this year that was used for multiple sellers because we had so many people, and we were running through hundreds of thousands of rows. It was just huge. We were going through massive, massive amounts of data. Now, do we need that anymore? Not right now, but that type of scale is huge, though. Most people aren't needing that scale this quickly. Like we would be able to plug in 30,000 row sheets and have them ready to review in like 2 days.
Right. I would assume with your 3PL you have a bit more employees and labor just because of the nature of the business.
It is more labor dependent. So yes, we do have staff, but we also flex staff. So I have a core team. It's about 5 people right now. We're actually down to 3. We're running very, very lean. If we need, let's say we have a massive shipment coming in tomorrow or Monday or whatever, and that needs to go out that week, I can bring in 10 people within 24 hours. I can bring in 15 people. I don't think I'd bring in much more than that because it gets a little crowded, but you get the point. I can scale up very, very quickly. In Q4 last year, we had our core team of 5 people. Then we flexed up to 17, so 5 plus 12. We had 12 people show up as flex staff. Um, so yes, we it is a little more labor dependent, but we want to be as lean as possible in that regard too.
Do you mind me asking just like exactly how you do that when you talk about flex staff? Like, are you just basically hiring people like on a casual basis and as you need it, and then they're just always available for when you need to call them in?
We use flex staffing firms. It's kind of like a temp agency, but without
Gotcha.
the contract.
Gotcha.
So all we have to do is post a little job posting, kind of like you guys have Uber. It's
Yep.
like an Uber driver hot logging in and looking for not rides, but uh, people to take places. They log into an app and they look for places to work. And they say, oh, tomorrow there's this place that has this posting. I'm going to request to work here. It's going to be from 8 to 5 or whatever the time is. And I'll get paid, I don't know, 15 bucks an hour, 16, whatever the number is. And they can choose to accept or they can choose to select another one. And those shifts, we always have enough people apply for the shifts, so we just do that.
Gotcha. I never thought about that with employees when we're scrambling. I'm always trying to find friends or family to come help out. So I never thought about that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't think they offer it in Canada, but in the United States we use an app called Bacon. There's a few others out there as well, but we just happen to use Bacon right now.
I know obviously like we do have temp agencies here. I'm not sure if we have like exactly like gig economy stuff like that, but that's something I'm going to look into.
Uh, I'll just say that temp agencies on average are drastically cheap, uh, drastically more expensive than kind of these gig economy apps. But these apps are growing in popularity that I suspect that the temp agency market is going to take a huge hit
Yeah.
because temp agencies, you're going to be paying, so for like a $15 an hour employee, you're going to be paying probably 22 to $27 an hour or more for a temp agency.
Right.
For the gig apps, it's like a flat 30% markup. So for $15 an hour, I'm paying 19.50. It's a huge savings.
For sure. And I would assume, like, obviously, when you're hiring these people, there is limited amount of training that you have to provide them. Like, they wouldn't come pre-trained, but with prep and pack, it's relatively limited for what actual training is
I,
needed.
I have a rule for our flow is if I cannot train someone to do prep in less than 15 minutes and get integrated into our process, we have a problem. And it's not the employee's problem. It's because we need to keep prep as simple as possible. So I can integrate a prepper within our process in less than 15 minutes and get them going. So that means I don't have time to train them on all the computer stuff or whatever. Like we have processes that if I need a prepper to start prepping, 15 minutes or less.
Yep,
Oftentimes it's 5 minutes or less. Um, when it comes to the more complex steps of the process, that's where my staff comes in who are on regular payroll, and that's where they are trained more. But that's why they're on regular payroll.
for sure. That's a really good point. Gabriel just had a question here. So he just said, should I order from my suppliers every X amount of weeks and do it at the same frequency every time, or just order whenever some of my SKUs are getting low in inventory? And this is specifically related to the low inventory fee that's coming up.
Every supplier is different. So, for example, in a perfect world, you would send in 1 day of inventory every day on the 29th day. But do we live in a perfect world? No, unfortunately. So, what's your supplier minimums? Do you get price breaks if you get certain volumes? Whatever. Like, if you can manage ordering every week of all of your SKUs or whatever's needed, then great. But you have to find the balance between order frequency and stocking too much. So if you can order more frequently, great. It's just going to be more management for you. I order probably once or twice a month from our grocery vendor, and that works out. My electronics vendor, I order usually once every other month, and then some back orders will come in here and there. But it's not because I can't order more. It's just that I have found is the best option for our current structure. Will that change in the future? Probably. You know, it's Amazon. Everything's changing, but every vendor is a little bit different. So you have to order based on what makes sense for you. If you can order 3 times a week, good for you. That's just going to be more management, in my opinion.
And I think a lot of this comes down to like what James mentioned about management, really keeping tabs and tracking what your overall lead times are. Specifically, how long it takes you to receive that inventory, get it to Amazon, get it received, and how long it takes that vendor from the time you order it to get to you guys. And you can add up all that lead time together, then you can get much better estimates of how far out you have to order.
Not only that, we were just talking about keeping your business very lean. Every time I say, "Oh, that's more management," "Oh, that's more management," someone's got to do it.
Yeah,
So if you're going to have someone do all these things, that's fine, but you're adding more staff or more VAs or even just more work for an existing person that takes away the opportunity to do other work.
yep. And so Jaden mentioned, just because we were talking about the gig economy stuff, he mentioned TaskRabbit. So I believe that's something similar. I think the US has it, and we have that in Canada as well.
That's more of like, hey, I need a particular task done, but there are other apps that are designed for, especially for warehouses and manufacturing, for these types of gigs.
Right.
Um, I'm sure you could replicate similar results, but the TaskRabbit's not designed for what we're talking about. I would try to find one. So there's a few apps: Bacon, InstaWork, Variable, VERYABLE, and Trava, TRABA. So look for similar ones to all those for Canada, and some of those may service Canada. I don't know. I just know that um, one, Canada has different labor laws and requirements than the US, so there's certainly different challenges there. Not good nor bad, just different. and two, different apps. There may be a Canadian company that specializes in this. I just don't know Canada in that regard.
For sure. That's something I'll definitely look into after this session, and then
Oh, and a lot of them are regional. So, like
right,
for example, Bacon services my area, but they don't service, let's say, California.
right,
However, there are other apps that do service California. So you might find one that, hey, this one only works in Vancouver. Well, if you can find one that works for Vancouver, you can probably find one that works for Toronto. Um, it every region will have different opportunities in that regard.
for sure. And yeah, Jaden just mentioned, he said, I guess part of this could also be buying extra and holding units at your prep center or yourself in case you have unsteady supply chain and need to push in units without having external factors. I believe that's definitely viable if you have the storage space or if you're willing to pay your 3PL the additional amounts for that. But a lot of
And you can manage it.
yeah, that too. Because I imagine, like with you guys, I would imagine if you are storing inventory for customers, you're going to be charging them accordingly.
Well, we do, and we disincentivize storage because, I, let's be honest, I'm not making a lot of money on storage.
Yeah,
I would much rather take the square foot. Let's say it's 100 square feet. 100 square feet. Okay, I might make a couple $100 in storage, especially if it's racked. Cool. But 100 square feet of prep. How many units can I prep in a month for 100 square feet? A lot. I would much rather have prep going in and out.
for sure. And that would be like you personally as well. Like if you're prepping in a small warehouse or your garage, you're only going to have so much space. I mean, obviously, if your space can account for it, sure. But there's probably better ways you can utilize that space.
Yep.
Yep. It looks like we just have one additional question here. This is kind of a tangent, and Amir just asked because he heard your conversations about talking about wholesale. This isn't specifically what this conversation is for, so if you don't want to get into this, not a problem. But he just asked, are you able to give some guidance on how to find vendors or suppliers to buy inventory from? And he mentioned, for example, the grocery industry supplier that you talked about.
Um, Finding suppliers, you have to start somewhere. If you're going to start with distributors, finding the top 20 CPG food distributors in the United States, not that hard. The key thing is you have to know how to communicate with these people. If I spew out in the conversation right now, when you're working with a grocery food distributor, you should know about AOMs and BTSTs and I think OMs or AOMs, and there's another one. There's all these terminologies that are kind of specific to that industry. You now know how to communicate with those distributors. One, at a higher level, you will gain more respect because you know what you're talking about. Two, if you know the category, that helps too because you know the nuances of, let's say it's pet, you know about pet stuff. If it's outdoor, you know about outdoor stuff. And three, you know how to get better pricing. If you don't know what a BTST is, or an AOM is, or like a discount, the different types of discounts, there's like more than probably a dozen different types of discounts you can get depending on the vendor and distributor, etc. People think, oh, it's just volume discounts. No, there's way more than just volume discounts. BTST is a way to buy, but it's also a way to get better pricing. But if you don't know all this terminology, what's the point? You don't know how to get these discounts. There's trade show discounts, there's special timing, there's promos, there's monthly promos, there's brand promos, all these different things. But the other thing is you're approaching these brands or these distributors, and you look like every other Amazon seller. Versus the retail store knows how to communicate with these distributors, and they get better pricing. You start with distributors because that typically can open up the door to other things in the future. Like, oh, I'm buying so much from this brand, maybe I can buy a brand direct, or maybe I can get a specific discount with brand ABC through this distributor, or maybe I can request the distributor to stock flavor E because we only have A, B, C, and D. We don't have the E one. There's so many ways a distributor can open up doors. I work with brands, but I've been in this business a little while. We started doing brand management. There's ways to approach that too. Um, that topic is so big and broad, it's really, really hard to answer quickly. What I would highly recommend if you're able to go to AMZ United, there's going to be some very, very helpful topics on that. But at the end of the day, um, going through distributors is a great method. And I think the true question is not you need distributors because you can find some. Google Maps, Import Yeti. There's lots of distributors out there. I suspect you are not as thorough as me when going through a distributor list. Almost everyone I talk to on like a high level, in depth analysis of their sourcing process has huge gaping holes in their process. Yes, there are scanning tools. Yes, there's Keepa. Yes, there's that. There's all these different things, and those are great tools. But it's very, very easy for stuff to slip through the cracks. If you say, hey, scanning software is the 80-20, it finds 80% of the product and 20% of the profits. If you want the 80% of the profits, you got to find either what most people are not finding or get things at prices most people aren't paying. One of the two.
Yep, really good tips. And yeah, so if I were to relate that to some of the experience that I had, is I have an account with a multinational beauty distributor that I should have never been able to get an account with because you technically need a beautician or a hairstyling license in order to open up an account with them, right? But my family had previously had a business in that industry that I was a part of, so I had a lot of knowledge about that business. And so when I was talking with the sales rep when I first opened the account, it came as second nature, and he never even asked for a license for myself and automatically offered me a really good discount because he just assumed that I was part of the industry. He knows now that obviously I sell on Amazon, but he just assumed off the hop that I was part of the industry and this is kind of standard. So those are really good tips.
That's a wonderful category to be in if you can get into it.
Yes, yes, it is. Assuming that you don't get hit with all these bullshit removals that have been happening recently for these brands.
Yep. I'm in grocery and electronics right now, and there's not a single category that's ideal. But I used to sell a lot of beauty. It's a brutally tough category, but if you can do it, it also can be a great category. So my biggest recommendation in terms of sourcing, like where to find suppliers, is stop limiting yourself to grocery, pet, and HBP, which is health, beauty, personal care. I have a prep center or 3PL, whatever you want to call it, and almost every new seller is in those categories.
Yep.
And I'm not saying there isn't opportunity to this. There's absolutely opportunity. But like, why are we ignoring like every other category?
Yeah, there's lots of opportunity in all the other categories. Like you never know what you're gonna find sports and outdoors, or just parts for machines, or just
The home category is
household
one of the
goods.
biggest.
Yes.
The home category is one of the biggest on Amazon.
Yep.
It is the least, um, like, that's the category we get the least amount of prep in. It just blows my mind.
And honestly, like realistically, almost any category, well, really any category can work for you on Amazon. Like some of the biggest Amazon sellers in the world are still booksellers, and I mean that's an absolute grind, and they need a shit ton of inventory, and lots of places to source it. But you can make a really good amount of money with books if you really want to.
I was talking with someone the other day. It's like, we don't sell in any category except welding.
It's
And
very
they do
true.
a lot. Like, it's not like they're selling $5,000 a month. They do a lot. And they're like, yeah, we know the welding market. They go to the welding trade shows. They know all the welding vendors. They know all the welding terminology. Oh, we know the difference between TIG welding versus spot welding versus that welding. That we know the different tools, the different brands. Guess what? When they talk to a welding company, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And why do you think they get the accounts? They know what they're talking about. Yet you walk into literally any of the other distributors knowing barely anything about the niches that they're in, and you expect to be handed everything on a silver platter. Like, that's not how this industry works. Just showing experience and knowledge can open up more doors than you can imagine.
100%. And yeah, like there's definitely suppliers that exist that are you get an application from them, you fill it out, you automatically open an account with them. But those tend to be low-hanging fruit, and a lot of people have access to those. So you can still extract profit out of those suppliers, but generally speaking, it's few and far between the products that you can actually source from them. A lot of them only end up being really viable if they have like distributor-wide discounts on their catalog, which they do a couple times a year or something like that. Um, the harder, generally speaking, the supplier is to open an account with. Typically speaking, the more profitable and more long term those products are going to be viable for you.
And we now do brand management, so we're working with brands more. We've gotten good enough at what we do that brands now approach us. We're not even going to brands anymore, and they're finding us, and they're like, "We want to work with you." I had a conversation, I think it was yesterday or the day before, whatever it was, and they're like, "I want to give you this brand. I want to give you this brand. I have this brand. I need some help here. Um, you're gonna now be my Amazon guy. I put everyone too." I'm like, I can't handle this many people. Like, most people would like dream to have that problem, but I'm like, look, I can't take on like 10 brands. That's just like way too much.
Yeah,
We can like start one at a time, or maybe take two, whatever. But like, don't send me 10 brands. I'm gonna be overwhelmed. However, I've proven how we work, and we're effective at what we do, and we've provided value. I hate that term, but we've mapped what that actually means. Instead of saying, "Oh, we can provide you value," "Oh, we can," no, I grew a brand sales 37% last year. That's a number. That's a real number. That's a seven-figure number. Like, that's a real piece of information that people can compare against. Not, "Oh, we fixed your titles and made them prettier." Nobody cares.
especially if you're dealing with a distributor, not a brand.
If I grew this brand sales, let's just say $1 million, and I'm just picking a simple number, that's a real thing.
Yep,
And not at a loss either. That was a profitable $1 million growth. That is real information that brands care about.
definitely. And yeah, like to relay like what you mentioned about getting given opportunities. My situation that I had that I can think of that was a little bit different was I had gotten really early on into health and beauty, or beauty specifically, because of the knowledge I had in that industry. And then with that, I was able to get access to a brand direct account directly out of the US who was shipping to me here in Canada. They had no distributors in Canada, but I got that account because I already had the relationship with my supplier here, and then it went full circle because as soon as they started getting distributors in Canada, they actually gave my information to the distributor that they launched with. That distributor reached out to me, who I never had an account with. I was able to talk to them like I was in the industry. I already had references from other beauty distributors in Canada, and so the process to open an account with that new distributor was very easy and seamless. And that opportunity literally came right to my doorstep without me even having to do anything.
Yep.
Yep. Gabriel just asked, and this will probably be the last question, and then we'll wrap up. I don't want to take up too much of James this time. But Gabriel asked, I have never directly asked a supplier for discounts. Some I have been buying for a couple of years. How would you suggest I approach them? Write down a PO with good quantities and a price per SKU. I'd be willing to pay if I buy X amount.
I assume you have some sort of contact or sales rep there. Say, what are some discount structures that you guys offer as a start? Just keep it very casual, low pressure, and say, how can I work towards some better pricing? Because I have some products that I would like to really buy, but the pricing just isn't quite there yet. Maybe they might say, "Oh, send us a list, and we'll quote it out." I have one vendor that I just send an email and they give me quoted prices. Another one might say, "Oh, if you spend $50,000 a month, you get this price discount." Another one might say, "Oh, if you take a certain quantity of that SKU, or we can place an order with the vendor, and it might not ship right away, but you might get a better price if you're willing to wait 3 weeks." There's all different types of discounts. Every vendor is a little bit different, but can't get a discount if you don't ask. And don't ask for a discount up front and say, "Hey, I want discount this." You say, "How do y'all work?" Like, learn, engage, and be like, kind of build that rapport and say, how do I work towards better pricing?
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I personally like to, with new suppliers especially, I do like to go the route of getting access to their catalog, assuming that I can, having good conversations with them up at the top of the conversation, putting together what I think our PO is going to be, and then assuming, and again, assuming that our initial PO is going to be large enough, like multiple tens of thousands of dollars, then saying, hey, this is what I'm interested for initial PO after looking through your catalog. I am willing to buy this from you today if I can get X amount of discount. I do like to go that route with new suppliers for the initial PO, just assuming that I'm willing to spend enough money with them to make it worth their while.
Yep. And let's be honest, most distributors hate Amazon sellers, so you're probably getting charged a really high rate anyways.
Right.
If you're professional about it, you can probably get a little bit off. You ain't going to get 40% off,
No.
but 5% off here and there adds up.
Yeah. And yeah, like again, to just kind of circle back to James's point earlier about being in the industry, knowing the lingo, talking the talk, with that beauty distributor, like the one that opened very early on, again, without me even asking, he's just like, off the top, you get 15% off everything. And that's 15% off everything, even if they have discounts. So, I mean, that was a super solid discount. And if I didn't have that conversation with him and know that language, that probably wouldn't even happen, even if I asked.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. So, yeah, I mean, if there's anything else you want to add, James, before we wrap it up, certainly feel free. Throughout the session, I have linked to your website, to your article, to AMZ United. In the session, I have linked to basically all your socials as well. So if anybody does want to find out about James, about AMZ United, about his prep center in Fort Worth, Texas, you can certainly visit those links. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up at all, James?
Nope. Hope to see you all at AMZ United. We will have hopefully some really good sessions. I've already got some speakers lined up that I am really excited about. They're not announced yet, but um, yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty neat year.
Beautiful. And yeah, like I mentioned, we had quite a few people in here that attended AMZ United last year. There will probably be more this year, and I'm actually going to make my way out there myself. It's very rare I get away, so I think it's about time, and I think that could be very valuable. So I will meet yourself there, James, in August. But yeah, I
Yep,
definitely.
and if you want to, pretty soon we're going to be having a little affiliate program for AMZ United and a little competition on who can effectively bring the most. And there's some neat affiliate prizes.
Right on, right on. Cool. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time and doing this for us here, James. It was very informative, and I bet that many people found a lot of good value in it. And we'll get it posted up on YouTube probably by the end of this evening, if not by tomorrow, and then even more people can get value from the session as well.
Alrighty, I will, I guess, catch y'all around later.
Perfect. Thanks, James. Really appreciate it.
Your Bruce.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye bye.